Do you know what the Torah actually says about the foods God specifically commanded us to eat for long life? Not in metaphor, not as poetry, as a direct, explicit promise, written in the oldest legal text humanity has ever known. I have studied this passage every single day for 43 years, and I still find something new in it every time I open that page, because what is written there is not simply a dietary suggestion, it is a covenant. And most families, even deeply observant families, have missed the full weight of what that covenant means for their table, their body, and the length of their days. My name is Rabbi Shlomo Katz. I was born in Tzfat, Safed, the city in northern Israel where the Kabbalah was formalized, where the air itself carries something ancient and alive. I studied in the yeshiva of Tzfat, and later at Bar Ilan University, but my real education began much earlier in the kitchen of my grandfather, Reb Yosef Katz, a Kabbalist trained in the lineage of Tzfat's greatest masters. He taught me, before I could read, that every food God placed on this earth carries a spiritual code, a blueprint of blessing that can heal the body, protect the home, and draw abundance into a family for generations. I have spent 43 years verifying that teaching through Torah, Talmud, and Zohar. And what I have found has never stopped astonishing me. In this teaching today, I'm going to share with you a Torah secret that most families have sitting right in front of them and do not see. I am going to show you the specific foods God connected to the promise of long life, what the sacred texts say about why these foods carry that promise, and what my grandfather taught me about activating their blessing in your own home. Toward the end of this teaching, I will share something he only revealed during private moments at the Shabbat table, something about the correct intention behind eating these foods that changes everything about how their blessing flows. These foods are part of what my grandfather called the divine blueprint of the Jewish kitchen, the Shivat HaMinim, the 7 sacred foods of Israel, named in Deuteronomy 8:8. Today, I am teaching one of these 7, but I want you to understand from the beginning, each one of these foods becomes more powerful when understood in relationship with the others. This is not one piece of advice. This is one part of a system. I grew up watching my grandfather move through his kitchen the way a conductor moves through an orchestra. Nothing was random. Every ingredient had a reason, a season, a blessing attached to it. He was not a large man, but he had a presence that filled every room he entered, and I believe to this day that much of that presence came from how he ate. Not just what he ate, but how and why, and with what level of consciousness. He lived to 91 years in full clarity of mind, walking the stone alleyways of Tzfat until the very end. I used to think that was simply his constitution. Now I understand it was something he cultivated deliberately, day after day, at every meal. The kitchen in his house had one window that faced west, toward the mountains, and in the late afternoon the light would come through that window and fall across the wooden table where he prepared everything by hand. There were always certain foods present in that kitchen. Always. Not because of habit or tradition in the superficial sense, but because he understood something about them that I am only now, at 71 years old, beginning to fully articulate. He understood that these foods were not merely nutritious. They were, in his words, carriers of divine intention, placed on this earth with a purpose that extended far beyond calories and vitamins. Most people today have lost this understanding entirely, and I do not say that with judgment. The modern world has organized food around convenience, around economics, around industrial logic. The sacred dimension of eating has been quietly erased from most kitchens, including, I must say honestly, many Jewish kitchens where kashrut, The laws of sacred eating is observed meticulously in terms of what is permitted. But the deeper spiritual layer of why these specific foods carry blessing has been forgotten. The rabbis rarely teach this in public. It lived in private transmission from grandfather to grandson, from teacher to student, around a table with candles burning and the weak at rest. That is where I received it. And now I am responsible for passing it forward. If you have ever felt that something was missing from your table, a quality of blessing, of protection, of vitality that you sensed should be there but could not locate, write Shivat HaMinim in the comments below. I read everyone, and I want to know how many of you are feeling that pull toward something older and truer than what the modern world has offered. Let me speak plainly about something that most people do not want to acknowledge. We are living through a moment in history where human longevity, despite all the advances of modern medicine, is becoming increasingly complicated. The data is not encouraging. Chronic illness is not declining. It is expanding. Inflammatory conditions that were once rare are now common. Cognitive decline is arriving earlier in life. A report from the American Journal of Public Health noted that for certain age groups in recent years, life expectancy in the United States has actually decreased. The medical system has extraordinary tools for crisis intervention, but it does not have an answer for the slow erosion of vitality that most people experience as simply aging, as simply normal. They accept it. They should not. Meanwhile, in the ancient world, in the world of the Torah, the Talmud, the Zohar, there was a completely different understanding of what sustained life. It was not purely biological, it was covenantal. The Jewish tradition teaches that long life is connected to specific behaviors, specific ethical commitments, and, in ways that are rarely discussed, specific foods. The Torah does not say eat well in the abstract. It says eat these. And these specific foods appear not once, but across hundreds of references in the sacred literature, always in connection with blessing, with vitality, with the sustaining of life across generations. I spent many years in my 30s and 40s, I will be honest with you, partially distracted by the academic dimensions of my studies. I was writing, teaching formally, engaging with the intellectual layer of this tradition. And during those years, I became somewhat careless with my own table. I ate without intention. I ate quickly, between lectures, without the blessings my grandfather insisted upon, without the deliberateness that transforms a meal into something sacred. My health during that period was the worst it has ever been. Not dramatically, not a crisis, but a slow graying of vitality that I did not recognize for what it was. It was only when I returned to my grandfather's approach fully, in my 50s, that I understood what I had allowed to slip. The tradition teaches that when we disconnect from these sacred foods and from the consciousness that surrounds them, we are not simply eating poorly. We are disconnecting from a source of blessing that was established at the moment of creation. What I discovered in that return is that this is not a collection of isolated tips. It is a system. 7 sacred foods that work together as a complete code. That system is what I have spent the second half of my life organizing and teaching. The passage I am going to anchor today's teaching in is Deuteronomy 30:20. Not the famous verse about the 7 species. That is Deuteronomy 8:8, which forms the foundation of the entire Shivat HaMinim system. Today, I want to take you to a less quoted but equally profound passage. In Deuteronomy 30:20, the Torah says, "Love the Lord your God, listen to his voice, and hold fast to him. For the Lord is your life, and he will give you many years in the land. He swore to give your fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." The Rambam, Maimonides, in his commentary on this verse, makes an observation that stopped me the first time I read it as a young man. He connects the phrase, "He is your life," directly to the physical sustenance God provides, meaning the specific foods designated as sacred. Life, in the Torah's understanding, is not merely the absence of death. It is a quality of being that is sustained and replenished through the right relationship with the divine gifts of the earth. The specific food I am teaching today is olive oil, the oil pressed from the olive, one of the Shivat HaMinim, one of the 7 sacred foods of Israel. And when I say olive oil, I am not talking about it the way a nutritionist would talk about it, though everything modern nutrition says about it is consistent with what the tradition has always known. I am talking about it as it is described in the Zohar, the central text of Kabbalah, compiled and taught here in Sa'at by Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai and later by the Ari, Rabbi Isaac Luria himself. In the Zohar, the olive and its oil are described as a vessel of divine light, the same oil that burned in the menorah of the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. The Zohar teaches in Parashat Terumah that the olive tree is unique among all trees because it does not lose its leaves in winter. It holds its green even in the darkest season. And this is not merely botanical, it is a spiritual signature. The olive carries within it the energy of continuity, of life sustained through darkness, of blessing that does not diminish. The Talmud, in Tractate Menachot, discusses at great length the specific qualities required of the oil used in the temple. Only the first pressing, the oil that emerges from the olive without force, from simple weight and gentle pressure, was considered pure enough for sacred use. The rabbis of the Talmud derive from this that the first pressing carries the highest spiritual potency. This is not coincidence. This is the tradition's way of encoding wisdom about quality, about the relationship between process and sacred outcome, that it remained misunderstood for centuries, until modern analysis confirmed that cold-pressed, unrefined olive oil retains an entirely different nutritional and biochemical profile than oil extracted under heat and chemical pressure. But here is what the Talmud adds that modern analysis has not yet fully appreciated. In Tractate Bereshot 57a, the sages list certain foods and experiences that bring joy, that broaden the mind, that strengthen the soul for Torah, learning, and for a long life. Olive oil appears on that list. Not olive oil. The rabbis are specific. The pressed, refined essence of the olive is what carries the full blessing. And this is the first principle I want you to understand today. The first principle is this: the blessing of olive oil is activated by intentionality, not merely by consumption. My grandfather did not simply cook with olive oil. He blessed it before using it. Not in a performative way, in a genuinely intentional way. He would hold the bottle before pouring and say quietly in Aramaic the phrase from the Zohar that recognizes the oil as a vessel of divine light. He would think consciously about the temple, about the menorah, about the unbroken chain of generations who understood this oil as sacred. And he taught me that this act of recognition, of seeing the food as what it actually is rather than simply as fuel, is the mechanism by which the blessing flows. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, taught that the divine sparks concealed within food are released through the consciousness of the one who eats. This is not mysticism for its own sake. It is a precise teaching about the role of human intention in activating what is latent in the physical world. The second principle is this: olive oil is specifically connected in the sacred literature to long life because of its relationship to what the Zohar calls or makif, the surrounding light. This is a Kabbalistic concept describing a quality of divine blessing that does not enter the body directly but surrounds and protects the person who has merited it. The olive tree, because it retains its vitality through winter, was understood by the Kabbalists of Tzfat as a physical manifestation of this surrounding light. When we consume its oil with awareness of this quality, we are, in the tradition's language, drawing that protection around ourselves and our families. The Zohar in Parashat Vayachel makes this connection explicitly, linking the use of olive oil in the home to the presence of the Shekinah, the divine feminine presence, within the household. A home that uses this oil with awareness and with blessing is, according to this teaching, a home under a certain quality of divine protection that extends the lives of those who dwell within it. Now let me give you the practical dimension of this, because my grandfather always insisted that wisdom without application is incomplete. He would say, in his dry Sephardic way, that a beautiful lamp that is never lit gives no light. So, here is what this looks like in the actual kitchen. Use only cold-pressed, unrefined extra virgin olive oil. This is the halakhic and spiritual equivalent of the first pressing described in Tractate Menachot. Do not heat it to high temperatures. The Zohar's description of it as a vessel of light implies a fragility that high heat destroys, and modern science confirms that the polyphenols responsible for its most profound biological effects are degraded above a certain temperature. Use it raw wherever possible. Over salad, over cooked vegetables after they are plated, on bread at the Shabbat table. And, before you pour it, take one moment, one deliberate moment. Recognize what you are holding. This is the oil of the menorah. This is one of the 7 sacred foods of Israel. This practice takes 3 seconds and transforms the act of cooking from a mechanical task into a spiritual one. The third principle. Olive oil is most powerful when it is present at the Shabbat table specifically. The Talmud in Tractate Shabbat discusses the obligation to have beautiful light at the Shabbat meal, and, while in practice this became candles, the deeper layer of this teaching is about illumination, about the quality of light that the 7th day brings into the home. Olive oil at the Shabbat table connects the physical meal to the spiritual light of Shabbat in a way that other oils do not. My grandfather never used any other oil at the Friday night meal. This was not a preference. This was, for him, a form of prayer. But this principle, and I say this openly, becomes 10 times more powerful when practiced alongside the other 6 sacred foods of the Shivat HaMinim. The olive is not the complete system. It's one voice in a choir. My grandfather didn't teach these 7 foods separately. He taught them as a system, a complete code, and the interactions between them, the way they support and amplify each other's blessings, is the teaching that took me 40 years to fully understand. I wanted to share something with you now that my grandfather only spoke about at the Shabbat table, and the quiet after the meal, when the candles were low and the children were almost asleep. He told me that the promise of long life in the Torah is not made to any individual food. It is made to the people of Israel as a whole, meaning it is a communal blessing, a blessing for the household, for the family line. He said that when a family eats these sacred foods together, with awareness, with gratitude, with the specific intention of honoring the covenant they represent, they are not merely nourishing their bodies. They are inscribing something into the spiritual record of their household that persists across generations. He used the word reshimu, an impression, a trace, the Kabbalistic term for the divine mark that remains even after a direct presence has withdrawn. He believed, and I believe, that a family that consistently honors the Shivat HaMinim at their table leaves a reshimu of blessing that protects their children and their children's children. This is why this knowledge matters now more than it has perhaps ever mattered. We live in a time of extraordinary fragmentation, of families scattered, of traditions interrupted, of ancient wisdom dismissed as irrelevant. The statistics on loneliness, on chronic disease, on the erosion of intergenerational connection are not separate problems. They are symptoms of the same disconnection. The Torah understood that the table is the center of everything, the place where body and soul are nourished together, where the covenant is renewed daily, where blessing is either invited in or left standing at the door. This is the moment to rebuild that center. My grandfather spent his entire life organizing these 7 teachings into a complete system. It took me decades to understand how deeply they connect. The olive, the fig, the date, the pomegranate, the grape, the wheat, the barley. Each one carries a different dimension of divine blessing. Each one, practiced in isolation, is powerful. Together, they form something that I have not found described anywhere in modern literature, but that the Zohar describes in terms I have spent my entire adult life learning to read. Let me leave you today with 3 things to remember. First, the promise of long life in the Torah is connected to specific foods, the Shivat HaMinim, the 7 sacred foods of Israel, and olive oil is one of them, carrying the spiritual signature of continuity, of light sustained through darkness. Second, the blessing of these foods is activated by intention, consuming them with awareness of what they are, with gratitude, with the brief recognition that you are honoring something ancient and true is what opens the channel through which their blessing flows. Third, this is a household practice, not a solitary one. The blessing of the Shivat HaMinim is designed for families, for tables, for the shared sacred space of the meal. This knowledge is yours. It has always been yours, whether you come from a Jewish family or from anywhere in the world, because this wisdom was placed in the oldest text of Western civilization for everyone who would read it. But it comes with a responsibility. Use it with good intention. Use it with gratitude. Use it with respect for the generations of study and devotion through which it has been preserved and passed forward. That is the covenant. Not only receiving the blessing, but honoring the source of it. In my next teaching, I will reveal another of the 7 sacred foods, one that my grandfather said was the most misunderstood in all of Torah. He believed that most families were eating it in a way that actually blocked its blessing rather than receiving it. You will not want to miss that one. Please subscribe and turn on your notifications so you do not miss a single teaching. If this video reached you today, share it with someone at your table, a family member, a friend, anyone who is looking for something older and truer than what the modern world is offering. Leave a comment below. Tell me which of the 7 sacred foods is most present in your kitchen right now. I read every comment personally, and your words matter to me. Shabbat Shalom. Until next time.